Thank you, ma'am. I'll call to order the Town of Hilton Head Island Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 2:31 p.m. Ms. Haley, are we in compliance with FOIA?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
And Ms. Haley, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. Walzak?
Present.
Ms. Loudermilk?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Fingerhut?
Present.
Ms. Bryson?
Present.
And Dr. Ponder and Mr. White are excused.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I want to welcome members of the public and Ms. Green, who is here for a public hearing on her variance request. We may have a town council member. I think I see Ms. Becker on the line. But welcome to all who are here for today's meeting. Primarily today, we're going to be considering a variance request, and pursuant to the rules of procedure for the Board of Zoning Appeals, I'm going to outline that procedure. First of all, the staff has a maximum of 20 minutes to present the facts and applicable legal principles that the staff believes support the position of staff with respect to the application for a variance. During the presentation by staff, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals may ask such questions as they deem appropriate. At the discretion of the chair, staff's time may be extended if the staff is unable to complete the presentation due to questioning from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Next, the applicant shall have a maximum of 20 minutes to present the facts and applicable legal principles that the applicant believes supports the application for a variance. During the presentation by the applicant, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals may ask such questions as they deem appropriate. At the discretion of the chair, the applicant's time may be extended if the applicant is unable to complete the presentation due to questioning from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Staff shall then have a maximum of 5 minutes to present any desired rebuttal, and we do allow time for the applicant to have rebuttal as well. Following the presentations, the Board of Zoning Appeals may ask such additional questions of the applicant or staff as board members deem appropriate. There is a public comment period allowed in public hearings for variances. If there are folks of the public, members of the public who want to make comment, the chair will call on interested citizens and request that they identify themselves, and Ms. Haley will help us out with that process. State their name for the record, and each person will have the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. The applicant and/or town staff shall clarify any information presented by the public before the board makes a motion. Following the presentation by all parties, the board, upon motion duly made and seconded, shall vote on the application for a variance. The motion shall contain at a minimum a finding of those facts which the member making the motion deems material to the decision and appropriate references to the relevant criteria of the Land Management Ordinance, also known as the LMO. Pursuant to provisions of the LMO, the board shall approve the application for a variance, shall approve the application for variance with conditions or modifications, or deny the application for variance. Following the vote, the staff shall prepare a written notice of action. The written notice of action shall include decision of the board as well as the findings of fact and conclusions of law adopted by the board with respect to the application for variance. The notice of action shall then be mailed by certified letter to the applicant and record owner of the real property affected by the application, if different from that of the applicant. Pardon me, that was my phone. I forgot to mute it. I apologize. I should know better than that. The notice of, I think I was talking about the notice of action being mailed by certified letter to the applicant. The decision of the board is then deemed final and applicable upon mailing of the notice of the action. That is a process that we follow for applications for variance pursuant to the rules of procedure. In addition, there are standards that are set forth in the LMO for applications for variance. The job of the Board of Zoning Appeals is to make sure that due process is allowed for all parties, especially procedural due process, which I've just outlined, and also substantive due process, which means that we apply the facts in the law, including the provisions of the LMO and the facts presented before us during a hearing. The next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Does the staff or any board member have any changes to the agenda? Ms.
No
Lloyd?
changes from staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Any changes to the agenda from board members?
No.
Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
By Mr. Walczak. Was there a second by Mr. Fingerhut?
Second, yes.
All right. All those in favor will so indicate or opposed, and I'd ask Ms. Haley to call the roll for that vote.
Mr. Walczak,
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk,
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson,
For the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut,
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson.
For the motion.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the February 22nd, 2021 special meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Motion made by Ms. Loudermilk. Is there a second?
Second,
Second, was that you, Mr. Fingerhut? Thank you.
yes, it was. Thank you.
Ms. Haley, will you call the roll on that vote, please, ma'am?
Mr. Walczak,
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk,
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson,
For the motion.
Mr. Fingerhut,
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson.
For the motion.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. The next item on our agenda is appearance by citizens, and these would be those who want to speak separate from speaking during the public hearing on the variance request. Ms. Haley, do we have any citizens who wish to appear before us?
No, ma'am, we do not. Additionally, public comments concerning agenda items were to be submitted electronically via the Open Town Hall portal. Portal comments were provided to the board for review and made part of the official meeting record. Citizens were also provided the option to give public comment during the meeting by phone. However, there were no requests to give public comment by phone.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on our agenda is unfinished business. And the chair knows, and the staff, as I understand, we know of no unfinished business at this time. So we'll move on to new business. And the first item under new business is the public hearing on variance request of Leslie Green. It's identified as VAR-271-2021 for a variance from LMO section 16-6-102, subsection D, as in David, wetland buffer standards to allow for a proposed vehicular driveway to be located within the 20-foot wetland buffer. The property is described as Lot 6B, Wiley Road, with a parcel number of R510-005 000-016E, as in Edward, quadruple O. And at this time, I've opened the public hearing and I've asked the staff to begin their presentation of 20 minutes. Ms. Haley, our secretary, will be our pleasant and delightful timekeeper. Ms. Lewick, you may proceed.
Thank you. All right. All right. Teresa, are you seeing my screen? Can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Yes.
Okay,
Ms. Lewick,
good.
I can also see it. This is Ms. Bryson.
Okay, thank you. My name is Missy Lewick. I'm a senior planner with the town of Hilton Head for the record. And as Ms. Bryson already indicated, this is a variance request for Lot B on Wiley Road. The request is from Leslie B. Green for a variance from LMO section 166102D wetland buffer standards to allow a proposed vehicular driveway to be located within the 20-foot wetland buffer and 5-foot setback from the wetland buffer. The property is zoned RM4 and it's also within the airport overlay district. The subject property is located on the north end of the island and is adjacent to tidal marsh. Wiley Road is accessed off of Dillon Road, and the parcel is highlighted in blue on this slide. The subject property is located at the end of Wiley Road and was subdivided in September of 1976. The large triangular marshfront property was subdivided into two smaller triangular parcels referred to as 6A and 6B on the subdivision plat from 1976, which is on this slide. And lot 6B has never been developed. The total parcel size is 0.59 acres with 0.42 acres of high ground area and 0.17 acres of tidal marsh, thus leaving a net acreage of 0.42 acres. And this is the boundary sketch just zoomed in a little bit closer to show that the applicant would like to build a home on the parcel, but due to the irregular shape of the parcel, the tidal wetland and associated buffer located throughout the property, and the location of the larger higher ground area toward the rear of the parcel has site constraints that make access to the developable area very difficult. The parcel shape is irregularly shaped compared with lots in the nearby vicinity. Here's a screenshot from our property viewer that shows configuration of lots within the vicinity, and as you can see, they're mostly rectangular in shape. The applicant would like to place a home in the area of the plan labeled house on this boundary sketch. The driveway to access the home would need to be located within the wetland buffer and the 5-foot setback from the wetland buffer, as shown here in red. However, per section 166102D3A, prohibited development activities within a wetland buffer, a pervious or impervious surface such as a driveway is prohibited. Also per table 166102D2 footnote number 3, buildings, surface parking lots, and vehicular access ways shall be set back at least 5 feet beyond the outer edge of the wetland buffer. And so the applicant is requesting a variance to allow a proposed vehicular driveway to be located within the 20-foot wetland buffer and 5-foot setback from the wetland buffer. Here are some photographs of the site. Here is where the property meets the Wiley Road Cul-De-Sac, and I'm going to come back to this photograph later on. Here is the portion of the high ground area that's located near the cul-de-sac, and I'm standing on the neighbor's driveway to take this picture. Here is part of the wetland buffer area. And here is the high ground area near the northwest corner of the property where the applicant intends to build a house. And during the review of this variance, we were made aware of a drainage depression area for Wiley Road that is in the area of the proposed driveway. Here is the subject. If you can see my cursor, just let me know. But this is the subject property where the triangular portion of the parcel meets the Wiley Road cul-de-sac. And you can see this area is called out as a runoff area. And so that area is a planned depression for the drainage of Wiley Road cul-de-sac. And here is an image, although it's difficult to see because of the document overlay that we did, it results in some blurriness, but this document shows the cul-de-sac road design plans with the boundary sketched overlaid that was used for this variance. And you can see here, this is the Wiley Road cul-de-sac, and here's that drainage depression area. And then this is the small triangular piece of the parcel that meets Wiley Road. So you can see that the hammerhead turnaround is located here within the cul-de-sac area, and that when the street was designed and the paving project occurred, the town didn't plan for access to the parcel because there was no home there currently. So no access was planned for Lot 6B in the way that the road was laid out. So I'm bringing this up because we are working with engineering and we don't have a solution for this, where the driveway would come through here, and we're going to have to re-engineer some of this area. But we're looking at possibly sharing the driveway to 6A for a portion, but then eventually we will move back over to the alignment shown on the sketch plan that was included in the staff report, and would meet back up with where the driveway was intended to be along the western edge of the property. But it may vary a little bit where it meets the Wiley Road cul-de-sac. We just wanted to make the BZA aware that there may be some discrepancy in the site plan that we're reviewing today, just based on that drainage issue. So now I'm going to go through the 4 variance criteria. Criteria number 1, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. The subject property is irregular in shape. It's mostly triangular in shape, which is similar to the adjacent lot, but is not typical with the lots in the general vicinity. And this property contains a tidal wetland, which runs throughout the parcel. Staff finds that this criteria has been met. Criteria number 2, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. The other properties in the area are rectangular in shape, which is a more typical lot shape that provides for a larger developable area. And while there are other properties in the vicinity located on the tidal wetland, the subject property has the tidal wetland and associated buffer from it running throughout the property in a zigzag that restricts access to the larger high ground building envelope. Therefore, staff finds that this criteria has been met. Criteria number 3, because of these conditions, the application of this ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The area of high ground adjacent to the Wiley Road cul-de-sac is small, and it would be difficult to place a home with the required 2 parking spaces in that area. Therefore, the larger high ground area toward the northwest part of the property offers a larger building envelope, which is where the applicant would like to build a house. As I've already discussed, per section 16.6.102D3A, prohibited development activities within a wetland buffer, a pervious or impervious surface such as a driveway is prohibited. This requirement unreasonably restricts the utilization of the subject property. Therefore, staff also finds this criteria has been met. And criteria number 4, the authorization of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or the public good, and the character of the zoning district where the property is located will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Staff have received no letters in opposition to this request. There was a comment made through the public portal but I was unable to determine whether they were in support or opposed to the request based on the response. Although I did receive a phone call from the neighbor adjacent to this parcel, who was the one that brought up the street drainage to our attention. She did not indicate whether she supported or was opposed to the variance request, but was concerned about the drainage at the end of the cul-de-sac. For the purpose and intent of the wetland protection standards are to protect and conserve natural wetlands that control flooding by absorbing and retaining floodwaters, that minimize erosion and sedimentation, maintain and enhance the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of open bodies of water, provide important wildlife habitat and native vegetation, and otherwise enhance the sustainability of the coastal island environment so important to the livability and economy of Hilton Head Island. The applicant would like to develop the property with one home and is requesting to construct a vehicular driveway to be located within the 20-foot wetland buffer and 5-foot setback from the wetland buffer. The applicant does not object to the conditions of approval that were contained in the staff report that I'll go over in a minute. The proposed driveway is planned to be the minimum allowable width within the wetland buffer and is planned to be located along the west property line to be located furthest from the OCRM critical line as much as possible. Adding one home with an associated driveway on the subject property will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or the public good, as it fits in with the overall character of the zoning district. Staff finds that this criteria has been met. Since staff finds that all 4 of the criteria are met with this application, staff recommends approval with conditions. And there are 5 conditions. 1, that the driveway should be no more than 14 feet wide within the wetland buffer. The driveway should be constructed of pervious materials. The driveway should be located per the sketch plan with driveway drawing in the staff report. Number 4, the trees and plants removed from the wetland buffer for the construction of the driveway shall be mitigated and planted back elsewhere on the site under review and guidance by our environmental planner. And number 5, that a town encroachment permit is required for the driveway connection at Wiley Road. That concludes my presentation on this request, and I would open it up for any questions that you may have.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Lewig. At this time, we'll go in a rotating order, allowing board members to ask questions if they have questions. And so it's a random rotating order that's been facilitated by Ms. Haley. So different times, different board members might go first or last or in the middle. This time, Mr. Johnson, I saw we lost you temporarily. Are you back with us?
I am, and I have no questions, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Fingerhut, your name's up next in the list.
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Waldsack, any questions from you?
Yes, and if Missy could put back the site plan for where you show the 2 lots in this cul-de-sac.
Do you want this one, or do you want
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
That isn't already an existing house on that adjacent lot that I see in the front. Is that that rectangle?
Yes.
Okay, so their driveway right now comes in on the left-hand side of their lot.
Yes.
Okay, and the plan is to utilize a portion of that driveway and then quickly make a left-hand turn and get into the buffer zone area?
Preliminarily, yes, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at minimizing how much of a drainage area that needs to be planned for elsewhere. In all likelihood, the depression areas might get bigger on both sides. I don't know yet what engineering is working out. They've just identified that those are possibilities. So we have some work to do on our end to talk about the feasibility of what the options might be. And I have discussed preliminarily this with the applicant, with Ms. Green, but that when we know, we will be working with her, and if it impacts the neighbor, with the neighbor as well, on what those possible solutions might be.
Okay, so it's really up in the air at this point. I was just concerned about the impact on the neighbor, and wouldn't the neighbor have to agree to allow the use of his driveway or her driveway?
It would likely be an access easement if both both owners would be accessing it. So
Then they'd have to come to an agreement on that, I would think, right?
but there could be other solutions that we haven't identified yet, which is why I don't have a plan that shows a proposed alignment to the cul-de-sac yet. But those are just some that have been discussed, but nothing's been drawn up.
Okay, and then the access to lot number, do I see 7 there?
This 7?
No, the other side, yeah. Is that lot 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that access is through the end of the cul-de-sac there where it's paved.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Loudermilk, any questions from you?
This might be more of a request for affirmation than a question, but is it safe to say that when this subdivision plat was approved, which was, I guess, back in 1976 when it was recorded, with the zoning as it is, RM4, that it was assumed that the lot would in fact be buildable and accessible for a house? Does that make sense, that since the plat was approved for recording, that it was assumed eventually there would be a home on the property? Or could be, I should rephrase that it could be.
I think that's a fair assumption, and the applicant has told me that this property has been in their family for some time, and that certainly the critical area has moved around over the years. So she could probably speak to, some of the changes that have occurred on the parcel much better than I can.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But the plat probably would not have been approved for recording if there was a clear problem or violation or whatever that would have prohibited building. That's kind of where I'm trying to go.
I do believe that I would have to look at some mapping of the critical line and how it's changed, but I do believe that this critical area has moved around quite a bit.
Okay.
I am aware that there was somebody who inquired about a year ago about in having a structure towards the front, and I even reviewed a plat with a drawing on that, and it was abandoned because a small home with the associated parking didn't fit in this front part.
Right. So that leads me just to one more question, which I'm not sure there's an answer. What if these critical lines keep moving? I mean, yeah, okay. That's what I said. I'm not sure there's an answer to that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So now it's my turn to ask questions. Pardon me. A couple of them. Well, maybe first a note. I think Ms. Loudermilk indicated that perhaps this plat was recorded in the 1970s. The town was not incorporated until 1983, and I'm not sure when, what if any subdivision requirements there were back at that time. Just don't know. Don't know whether the staff knows or not. Maybe Ms. Green has some history that she can tell us when during her presentation. But back to the questions that I have, I'm looking at the drawing which shows the proposed driveway, a 20-foot driveway, then it tapers down to 14 feet, which is a condition. Just wondering if the driveway has to be that wide through the buffer area. Does it have to be 20 feet wide, and then does it have to be 14 feet wide? Ms. Lewitt, could it be a narrower driveway through the buffer area?
14 feet is as narrow as it can be, per the fire marshal.
Okay, so that's a fire code requirement then. Okay, all right. And then the other question is related to the storm drainage basin, or I can't remember exactly what the proper term there is in the Hammerhead Cul-De-Sac. But would any of the conditions that are proposed need to be altered, or would another condition need to be added to address that storm drainage gathering area?
The only condition that may have to be altered, if you wanted, was that this drawing that I have up in front of you would just show the 14-foot within the wetland buffer, which is the subject of the variance, and not show how it connects to the cul-de-sac, as that part is unknown at this time. But that would be the only condition that's referenced, because this particular sketch is referenced as one of the conditions. And we could eliminate the 20-foot wide driveway connection portion and its connection to the cul-de-sac, but still have, I do think we still need to have a site plan referred to in the conditions.
Okay. And would the encroachment permit help to take care of that condition? Because the encroachment permit, I guess, would be subject to whatever requirements there are for the Hammerhead intersection and the storm drainage. Would that encroachment permit address that, whatever needs to be changed in that location?
Yeah, so right now, if my cursor down here, this is where that depression area is, and I happened to be there to take those site photographs after several days of rain, so there was actually standing water in that depression area. I'm told that after a couple of days, that depression area dries out. But so there is no pavement surface at the end of the cul-de-sac that you could just connect to. So there would have to be, regardless, there would be a town encroachment permit required, because to connect to this parcel, you're going to have to improve the surface to connect to the public right-of-way, which is a town-owned right-of-way.
Okay. So if the board were to approve this variance with the conditions outlined by the staff, then we might look at some kind of language that alters the connection between the 14-foot encroachment into the wetland buffer area to whatever access is allowed by the town pursuant to the encroachment permit, something like that. Something like that, yep. Okay, all right. Okay, I think those are the questions I have of staff at this time. Any other questions from board members before we move to the presentation by the applicant, Ms. Green? Okay, Ms. Green, welcome, and it is your turn to proceed. You have 20 minutes, and Ms. Haley will give you a kind reminder if you get near the end of your time, but you may proceed. And I believe she is muted. Ms. Haley, can you?
I'm muted.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I really don't have a presentation. I just, I agree with the town and their recommendations. If you guys had any more questions of me, I'm glad to answer it. But Lisa spoke on something about the history, why the property was subdivided and when it was subdivided. Was there an option to put a house there at that time? I could tell you a little history about that, but other than that, I have no additional stuff to say.
Yes, ma'am. I think that might be helpful based upon the questions from Ms. Loudermilk and for the rest of the board to know a little bit about that.
Well, when the property was subdivided, we'd had it a while, and the property was not like that. It was actually just like the other side, where the end of it was like a even even line. It wasn't jagged through it. Like we knew that we were going to develop that at some point. So my mom intentionally split it so that her kids could have that piece. But at the time it was divided, it wasn't like that. I would say during the various storms that came across, just eroded it over time. But yeah, it wasn't like that when it was divided.
Anything else, Ms. Green?
Nope. I have nothing else to say. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. We'll go around and ask board members if they have questions of you. So if you'll bear with us.
Okay.
Sure. Mr. Fingerhut, you're up first this time.
No questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Walczak, anything from you?
No questions.
Okay. Ms. Loudermilk, any questions from you?
No, but thank you for that history. I mean, again, I was just looking for affirmation that the intention all along was to build on the property. And if I heard you correctly, it certainly was.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, any questions from you?
I have no questions.
And so, Ms. Green, that is to me. And the only question I have is your neighbor, the folks who are on 6A, is that part of your family?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that whole Wiley Road was all family property.
Family property. Okay, that
my
makes.
mom's brothers.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Okay, all right. Any other questions from board members after we went through that round? Okay. Any staff rebuttal, Ms. Lewick?
No staff rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay. With no staff rebuttal, Ms. Green, we'll give you another chance. If there's anything else you want to add, happy to give you that opportunity.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. The next thing would be to see if there's any public comment, since this is a public hearing. Ms. Haley, do we have anyone who wants to make a public comment at this time?
No, ma'am, we have no public comments at this time.
Okay, all right. And at this time, unless there's an objection, we'll incorporate into the record all of the evidence presented during the hearing today, including the staff reports and the information from the applicant. Any objection to incorporating all of those documents and testimony into the record? Hearing none, they'll be incorporated. And at this time, I'll close the public hearing and we move to the board discussion. This time, let's go around and give each board member a chance to offer thoughts before a motion. Ms. Loudermilk, any thoughts or comments or discussion from you?
No, I mean, I would simply say that I certainly believe, I think the lot is of more than buildable size. The high ground continues to be more than sufficient to accommodate a home. I think it is pretty clear now that there was always an intention of a home on this property, and certainly a homeowner is going to want accessibility to the house through the driveway. So, I think the request is supportable.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, any comments or discussion from you?
I have no comments or discussion.
Okay. Mr. Fingerhut, any thoughts or discussion from you?
Actually, no, the staff report laid it out clearly, and just given the configuration of the lot, this just all makes sense.
Okay. Mr. Walczak, anything from you?
No, I have no comment. I think everything is fine the way it is.
Okay. And the last opportunity is for me, and I don't have any questions or comments. It seems to be a clear-cut family subdivision with opportunity for folks to build on the various lots. So at this time, I'll ask if there is a motion from a board member with regard to this variance request Again, it can be approval of the variance or approval with conditions or denial of the variance. So is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion. I would move to approve the variance based upon the staff's findings of fact and conclusions of law that are in the record with the conditions set forth in the staff report.
Okay. Is there a second? Mr. Walczak, I think I saw your fingers go up.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion on the motion before I ask Ms. Haley to call the roll? Hearing none. Ms. Haley, will you call the roll on the motion?
Certainly. Mr. Walczak?
For the motion.
Ms. Loudermilk?
For the motion.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, you appear to be muted on your end.
Motion. For
Thank
the
you.
motion.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fingerhut?
For the motion.
Ms. Bryson?
For the motion.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Green. Your request has
Thank
been
you.
approved. And the staff will be sending you the notice of action. If you have questions of the staff at that time, they can assist you with how to proceed after that. So thank
All
you
right,
very much,
Thank you.
and good luck with your project.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Green, you're welcome to stay with us if you would like to, but if you would
I'm
like
trying to figure out how to get out.
That's okay. We promise not to ask you anything else unless you want to talk to us. So thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
The next item under board business is discussion of possible amendments to our rules of procedure. Ms. Lewick and I had been speaking about taking a look at our rules of procedure, and as many of us are aware of, or probably all of us are aware of, the town has recently adopted a new comprehensive plan called Our Plan, and part of that plan is pursuit of excellence. And so as part of our pursuit of excellence, it would be good for us to periodically look at our rules of procedure and see if there's any amendments that we might suggest. We've already dealt with suggestions of substantive changes to the LMO when we've seen a couple of instances where we made suggestions, and staff will be reporting on the status of those later. But this would be the procedural part. And I think that there is a staff report in the file, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Lewick to follow up with that staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Bryson. Yes, we have been discussing just with myself and Ms. Bryson the possibility of looking into some changes, possible changes to the rules. And then I've also discussed those possible changes with our staff attorney, Ms. Bush, and we worked on the memo to bring before the full board just to make sure that there is agreement from the full board to look into possibly amending the rules. And kind of the first item was to look at what are the best practices for rules documents for South Carolina. And at the time we published this staff report, we hadn't found a best practice document, but Ms. Bryson found one for us. And so we do have that. We can use that document as well as look at a couple of other municipalities, what their rules state, and use that potentially as some framework to analyze whether our rules are meeting the best practices, both of the best practice guide that the Municipal Association of South Carolina published, as well as what other similar municipalities have as far as their rules go. There also, we've had a couple of reconsideration motions that this board has reviewed recently. And there were some questions on some of the terminology used in our rules, whether we should call it a reconsideration or a rehearing, and then what are some of the the criteria or that needs to be met to consider a rehearing or reconsideration. Currently, we use in the rules language that says it has to be something that was misunderstood or misinterpreted. And so perhaps by looking at some of the other rules and guides out there, maybe there's additional language that we would want to consider. And then one of them that seems to make a lot of sense is the filing date for the petition of reconsideration. Right now, it's 10 days from the hearing, and because the NOA is mailed out within 5 business days of the hearing, and it's sent by certified mail, it may not get there. It might get there 8 days from the hearing, and then they would have 2 days to react to filing a petition. So we thought that could maybe be changed to 10 days from the mailing date of the NOA, just to give enough time for someone to read that notice of action and realize that they have the option to file a petition for reconsideration. Another change that has been discussed was perhaps changing the references of chairman to chair or chairperson. And then finally, a question of whether or not we should allow public comment on appeals cases or not. Currently, we do not allow that, and we would have to do some research into that question to find out if it is something that can be allowed. And so those were some of the questions that were included in the memo that have been discussed in brief with Ms. Bryson, as well as Ms. Bush. And so we wanted to hear if the board is agreeable to these possible amendments to the rules, or if there are also other possible amendments to the rules that you wanted us to look at while we're going through this exercise.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Bush, is there anything that you would like to add to what Ms. Lewick has presented to us? And for members of the public, Ms. Bush is a staff attorney for the town of Hilton Head Island and serves as our attorney.
Good afternoon, everybody. One thing that I want to say is that the failure to have found what Ms. Bryson found, that was me. I spent most of my time looking at case law and other jurisdictions, and I couldn't find a thing. And there it was, right in the where it should be, with the Municipal Association of South Carolina. I think that these rules, that a best practices is a great idea, particularly, as you pointed out, Madam Chair, that the town has their comprehensive, or our comprehensive strategic plan that covers 10 years, and that we're looking to be excellent everywhere. And I think that having a procedure, and particularly should the makeup of the board change, it makes it easier to keep that continuity. Everything else that Missy has raised, I think originally I didn't think the idea of changing the name of the rehearing to rehearing instead of reconsideration was correct. I did some research and I found I didn't find any statutory guidelines on rehearings, but I found a case that seemed to have started it all. And they've, Missy, I know I emailed that to you and I can't find it right now, but the case sets out the reasons why a rehearing should be granted, and it's not focused on the misunderstanding or misconstruing. It's much more focused on the discovery of new evidence that couldn't have reasonably been discovered prior to the original hearing. So I'm now in favor of renaming it to rehearing, because that's what it is. It's not like an appellate procedure where you're reconsidering whether or not there was a wrong application of the law. It's much more focused on whether or not there's something new, which to me means a rehearing. So I think that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I suggested this, and Ms. Lewick and I agreed on this, and I know from the times we've had rehearings recently, the standard for the board to apply was quite confusing to us. From my practice of law, I'm more familiar with a request for a new hearing or rehearing based on new evidence which could not have been discovered. This test for reconsideration was a new one on me, and I found it confusing as well. So thank you, Ms. Bush, for checking into that for us.
Yes, ma'am. And I will track down that case because so that you can see the language and get it to you. I feel like I'm still swimming in the deep end here, but I'm starting to float. So
okay.
Anyway, I'll look for it. I appreciate your patience.
Yes, ma'am. We'll try to help you if we can. And in looking at the model rules from the Municipal Association, they refer to a rehearing based on new evidence, and they don't have the reconsideration based on the misinterpretation, or I've forgotten what the other language. I moved my paper.
Misunderstood, misconstrued.
Yeah,
there's some weird words, actually.
Yes.
Well, that's what sent me on the quest to figure out where did this language come from, because it is odd. It doesn't seem like code language, because once I realized that the model rules had that, I knew it had to have come from somewhere. So anyway, I found it, but now I don't have it.
Okay.
So
all right.
Apologies.
All right.
I'll find it as soon as we sign off, of course.
Sure. I know how that goes. Well, let's go around, give board members opportunity to comment again. This is, we're starting our discussion about this. We're not about to adopt specific new language today. There's a process under our rules, which seems to be a bit of an arduous process. And maybe streamlining the process to amend the rules might be something to add to our list. But let's go around and see if other board members have thoughts about those topics covered in the staff report, and maybe also trying to streamline our amendment process. Mr. Johnson, your name comes up first in this random list I have in front of me. Do you have comments or thoughts about our rules of procedure? Mr. Johnson, are you still with us? I think I see your phone number. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson is not on the line at this time.
Okay. All right. We'll go on to Mr. Fingerhut then.
Yes, thank you. No, actually, taking a periodic look at the rules and seeing how we could do better, I think, is an excellent idea. Changing the reconsideration to something more akin to a rehearing based upon new evidence that wouldn't reasonably be available at the time of the appeal or at the time of the variance request or other hearing, I think is an excellent idea, because it just makes more sense. Otherwise, reconsideration is in essence a quasi appeal, if you will, or I mean, for want of a better expression, a do-over. It just doesn't make any sense. So this has a little bit of cause, and I think that's much more targeted to fairness. Also though, on the public comment on appeals, We had looked at that a few years ago. And although certainly no reason not to take another look and get some other voices on this, at the time we concluded that an appeal of a town action is much more of a private issue, that perhaps what somebody else in the community thinks about it or feels about it shouldn't bear on the board's decision. Usually it's more of a legal analysis, and whether or not, again, neighbor A or B agrees or disagrees really shouldn't bear on our evaluation of the appeal of a town action. Again, it's something we can certainly look at, but at the time that's why we left that alone. So for what it's worth. But as to the rest, otherwise, I think it's a good idea to have a look.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Keep moving my paper. Let's see, Mr. Walczak, where to you in the list?
Yes, just one minor thing, and I agree with what David has said. But with regard to the rehearing, which is, I take it, we're going to rename it to that, what would be the procedure? Because wouldn't the applicant then have to, let's say, make a reapplication indicating the new evidence that he wants to present, so that then staff would review that before it even gets to us? Does that sound right?
Ms. Bush, can you address that for us?
I cannot answer that right now because I'm not familiar enough with the process that an citizen has to go through to appeal. But I feel that it's got to be based on some new evidence. So my gut is that yes, they're going to have to, because you'd need to decide based on what's in that application whether or not it truly is new evidence, rather than somebody, as Mr. Fingerhut said, is just trying to have a do-over.
Right.
And the real do-over, if that's really what they want, is in the 14th Circuit. So it's finally made some sense to me, but I don't know for certain. And Missy, do you?
No, but that's something that we could look through when we do some of the research and look at the model ordinances that or model rules of other municipalities, find out if they require certain application procedures for a rehearing or not. And so
it would make sense.
We'll look at that.
It would.
If I may, a rehearing is really more of a motion. So the moving party has the burden to set forth the elements necessary. The town would then get to oppose or not oppose the motion, and then the board would decide it. But that would be how it would go.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Walczak, with regard to the changes we're considering?
No, that's the only one I had.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Loudermilk, any discussion from you?
I agree with the comments to this point. I think the rehearing makes sense. I had the same question: who would determine whether or not there truly was new evidence to be considered? So I think that needs to be clarified. I'm certainly in support of changing the chairman's title to a chair. I think keep it simple. And on the public comments as to the appeals, I guess I agree with David to a point. I'm not certain I understand why and I'm going to say immediately affected neighbor, i.e. a next door neighbor, might not have the right to appeal. I would totally agree that the community at large does not warrant a voice in an appeal, but I might be swayed that an immediately adjacent property owner, possibly. That's one I'd be real interested to see what other municipalities are doing.
Anything else, Ms. Loudermilk?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you, ma'am. I think it's down to me then. I've already mentioned a couple of my thoughts. I would add with regard to public comments on appeal, in disclosing, I think I have for y'all before, having represented parties before. In North Carolina, they're called boards of adjustment. It's the same thing as a board of zoning appeal. But having represented adjacent property owners in appeals of staff decisions, and I'm familiar with a test for standing to determine whether or not you would have the right to do so. I think, to me, it's similar to, we just had a public hearing on a variance, and public comment was appropriate for a variance. So it's a different kind of thing. And it is possible that a certain type of staff decision might affect the broader community based on the type of decision, although perhaps a board would give greater weight to those who might be adjacent property owners or have some property interest which is affected. So I agree. I think it would be helpful for our staff members to take a look at what other jurisdictions do with regard to the rehearing process, and in addition with regard to appeals, if there's some need to have showing of standing, or what else might be appropriate in South Carolina. But I would respectfully request that we continue to look at whether or not that's something we want to do in changing our rules of procedure. So, anything else from anyone? Well, then I guess my broader question is, should we have staff go ahead and prepare some proposed amendments in light of our discussion for us to take a look at? Any objection to proceeding in that way?
No.
Okay, staff, go to it. The next item on the agenda is an update on, to the staff report, the waiver report, and the 2020 waiver summary. And Ms. Luke, if I could say one quick thing before you start, and I meant to email this to you yesterday, just a disclosure to the board. I shouldn't say just a disclosure. One of the waivers reported in the staff report is for 36 Allen Avenue. That is the address of the condominium development where I live. I had nothing to do with the waiver. I know that we're getting ready to do something with our parking lot, but I had no idea there was a request made, and I did not participate in the request at all. So just to disclose that that's where I live. And with that said, Ms. Lewick, I'll try not to step on your toes anymore.
That's okay. The waiver report included the 3 most recent waivers that have been approved by staff since our last meeting. If you have any questions about those, I'd be happy to answer those as best as I can. And then we also included the 2020 waiver summary that just lists all of the waivers that were approved in last year in one document. So if there are any questions about those, I'd be happy to answer those.
Instead of going around with a roll call, I'll just ask if anybody has any questions or comments about the waiver report and the waiver summary. All right.
Yeah, what were the 3 waivers? What were they?
I'm sorry?
What were the 3 waivers, you say?
There was one at 27 Old Wild Horse Road. It was a properties functioning together waiver that allowed us to eliminate the setback and buffer between 2 properties that function together as one site. There was a waiver at 45 Pembroke Drive that was for redevelopment of the public site, and it was related to some parking requirements, wheel stops specifically, and some parking space, handicap spaces and things like that. And then the third one was at 36 Allen Avenue, which was a substitution of nonconformities waiver, related to parking lot modifications.
Well, I have to make mention that I was the engineer who presented that waiver on behalf of the owner. Does that get me in trouble?
No.
Okay, just checking.
Good
This is just a
discussion.
report to you. The waivers are approved
Okay.
administratively, and it goes through there's an application form and
Right.
review by staff, and then approval process, and they're typically in conjunction with the development project, and in these cases they were.
Okay, as long as I'm okay.
Yes,
You're
Mr. Walczak, you and I get a star today for being abundantly disclosing. So
Well,
there is such a word. Okay,
good for us.
yes. The next item under staff report is the board training update. Ms. Lewick, anything to share with us about that?
Yes, we are planning on having our legal training in April, and we have I think we have 2 variance requests that we will hear in April. So we are going to plan on a second meeting either on April 28th or 29th, and Ms. Bush will hold her legal training and at that time. So we'll work with Teresa to get some communications out and pull the board on which of those 2 dates work best. But we are planning a separate training in April for the legal session. And then we also have a plan that we'll also hold a conducting meetings training in May. And we'll look at, I know a lot of board members have been doing those trainings that are available online. And so we'll see if we still need more hours, and we'll hold that training. I think most of you are fairly confident with how to conduct an effective meeting for the BZA, but that is one training that we already have created and could easily present if we still need more board hours. So we'll kind of play that by ear, but we do have that presentation. It was prepared 2 years ago, so we have it ready should we need it. And so we would do that in May if necessary.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Any comments or questions from board members? I'll just say thank you very much to Ms. Lewick and Ms. Haley for putting together that extensive list of training opportunities for us. That was very helpful, and to let us know how much more time we need to devote to our training individually. So thank you very much for doing that. The next item under staff report is the status of the LMO amendments, which we had requested be considered. Ms. Dixon, are you still there you are.
I'm here. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
ma'am. Welcome. Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't really have much to update you on. We have been working through the list and trying to prioritize, and we've got a very lengthy list that has been continued to be added to since last year. So we're prioritizing that, and we'll be meeting with upper management on how to go about getting these amendments started through the process. So hopefully by the next meeting, I should have a better, more informed update for you.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members for Ms. Dixon? Thank you. We'll ask staff to continue to put this on our agenda so we can keep remembering that we made some requests. Okay, thank you very much. Any other business to come before the board? I'll just note that I looked on my calendar and I think our next regular meeting is Monday, April 26th, again at 2:30. So hopefully folks have that on their recurring calendar, and we'll wait on staff to be in touch with us for the training dates, either April 28 or 29. Okay, if no other business to come before the board, I'll declare the meeting adjourned, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.